Welcome to the Dudley Unplugged podcast, a show that gets to the heart of plumbing. Welcome back to another episode of Dudley Unplugged. Today we're going to be talking about the issues faced by manufacturers and suppliers to the bathroom industry. I'm your host, Mark Morris, and we're joined on Dudley Unplugged by Tom Reynolds, who is the CEO of the Bathroom Manufacturers Association, or the BMA, and Jason Parker, who is not only Managing Director of Thomas Dudley, but is also President of the BMA. So welcome both.
Morning. Hi.
I suppose my first question is to Tom. Do you have to refer to Jason as Mr. President?
All the time. El Presidente, insist on it.
So I thought that'd be that's one of the reasons I'd want the job. I'd want the car, I'd want the title, I want everyone to stand up when I walked in the room. I thought that'd be just perfect. I thought.
No, all jokes aside, Jason's been an incredibly supportive president, and probably should refer to you as El Presidente.
Well, he would say that. Otherwise, I'd just have him killed. But not, so, you know.
So you get sort of one assassination per term, do you? Okay, yeah. So if Tom's not available for the next one, we all know what's happened.
Yeah.
So, Tom, could you just give us an overview of the BMA, what it does, how it works?
Yeah, certainly. So BMA has been in existence since 2001. Before that, there was a series of other trade associations that kind of developed into the BMA. We are in existence solely, really, to support the interests of bathroom manufacturers, as the title suggests.
Yep.
So that can be including advocating policy positions with discussions with government and other stakeholders happening all of the time, but also providing material which is going to help our members have a competitive edge.
So you have to deal with sort of politicians as well as manufacturers. You have to go right the way to the very top.
Yeah, we've had engagement with ministers, shadow ministers over the years, particularly in areas relating to the environment. So water policy is a big area for the BMA, but very regular conversations with civil servants as well on the real intricate detail of policy. Politicians most interested in the kind of overarching themes, if you like, and then the civil servants, the granular detail.
Yeah. Do you find that the politicians sort of look short-termist due to the nature of sort of their sort of almost lifespan within a government, or whereas manufacturers, we sort of have to look more long-term in what we do? Do you find that there's kind of a difference between how sort of politicians look at policy and the way things work and how manufacturers actually have to do it?
I'm not sure if it's long-term, short-term necessarily, but certainly there is a tendency to focus on the things which are in vogue at any given time.
Yeah.
So at the moment, for instance, we're talking a lot with government around water policy, because the water industry and what's happening with sewerage and so on is very much in the public eye. Barely a day goes by when there's not something in the newspaper about the performance of the water industry, whether that's the leakage or sewerage being
Yeah.
released. So that's a topical issue which has got a lot of political attention at the moment, and that means that we've got to talk to them about it. There are times when it's perhaps off the boil of public attention,
Yep.
and you can go for a long period where you're desperately trying to bang on the door to get their attention to talk about something, and it's a struggle.
So do you find it easier? I mean, Jason, so you can jump in. Do you find it easier to sort of get in front of politicians? Because I imagine they've probably got quite busy workloads.
Yeah, I think from a manufacturer's point of view, trying to get some time with the politician and get them to listen to you is really, really difficult. But if you're the voice of the industry and you've got sort of 80% of the manufacturers within the country, they're more likely to listen to you.
Yeah.
And Tom's got some very good contacts in that area, so I think he leverages those to the benefit of all of its members.
I suppose you have to work a lot harder in some ways because it's not a, I'm sorry to phrase it, it's not a sexy project, is it? It's not an industry that's going to, like the IT industry can be seen as quite sort of as something that people want to jump on the back of, whereas the toilets flushing cannot necessarily be seen as being that sort of.
Bathrooms can be sexy, I think. Yeah. Well, not personally. That's what I'm told. And normally, wives find bathrooms.
Bathrooms is a very sexy industry to be working in, as is proven by the people around the table. But you're spot on with regards to political engagement. I remember a few years ago we had a business critical issue around backflow protection, the AUK4 and AUK1, as it was the regulation that was involved, and getting political attention on something which was so important to our industry was quite tough, because you're talking about pretty geeky stuff.
Yeah, and I suppose for a politician that they manage their time quite well, and they have to sort of look at where they think they can. So they're always looking at re-election as well, aren't they? So I suppose they have to look at things that's going to benefit. And we all know that water conservation is a long-term project, something we should be doing all the time, long-term. And I suppose for a politician, there might not necessarily be something that drives them at that particular moment, because it is kind of hidden as well, hidden away from the general public.
I've got some sympathy with politicians. They're expected to be an expert on absolutely everything, when in reality, they're receiving literally thousands of emails every day on issues ranging from, events in Palestine to, in our case, backflow protection, WCs. How can you really be an expert on even a fraction of the policy agenda that you're being asked about? And it's a bit unrealistic that is our expectation of politicians. In an ideal world, I'd love it to be the case that a politician is allowed to become a specialist in, say, water policy.
Yeah.
In reality, unfortunately, just our system doesn't allow it.
No. And even if we had one government in power for a long time, they move people around that frequently that they just can't understand that. The one thing I would say, though, with politicians, I think they have sort of woken up recently a bit lately, because I think historically they'd be all about trying to grab the headlines, we're going to do this, and then it'd sort of peter away in the background. It wasn't delivered. But I think certainly now with water shortages, water pollution, the government have woke up and it's like, Christ, we need to do something about this. And that's why we're getting a better level of engagement.
I suppose it was in the press recently, as Jason, you mentioned, before we started, about the boat race. They advised not to throw them in the water in case they got, I think it was E. coli or something, wasn't it? I mean, that shows the state of how some of the waterways are at the moment.
I think one of the better things about the British system of running government is the permanent civil service. And something really, since the last time the water regs were looked at in 2001, that's been missing is permanent expertise around water policy in DEFRA. That, I think, has been addressed. There is now a team dedicated to this area of policy, and they're really getting their teeth stuck into it. So the plan for water came out last year. They're now working through some of the specific detail on what that means in practice for product manufacturers, for the water industry, and for other stakeholders. Hopefully, those same civil servants will be in place if there's a change in government.
I suppose it's an adaptation from a manufacturer's point of view, because politicians change, priorities change, policies change. Sort of, from previous to, I think it was 2001, where only siphons were allowed to be used in the UK. Now flush valves were brought in because we were more part of Europe. That created problems now that we're, as a manufacturer, we're now trying to fix. But it wasn't a problem that was initiated by manufacturers. It was a problem that's created by a policy change. So I suppose from a manufacturer's and an association's point of view, keeping up with the changes that come down from above to us that we have to deal with, I suppose, is quite sort of prominent in how we actually go about doing our work. So from a manufacturer's point of view and an association point of view, how do we find that we sort of keep up with the changes that sort of bring down onto us?
Well, I think I'd ask Jason to respond to this one, because is that really why you're in an association like the BMA, to help keep track?
I think we can keep track with the changes. I think what we would predominantly like is a say in those changes as they're made.
Yep.
And certainly when we went into Europe and the changes happened in 2001, we didn't have any say of that. We were following Europe, and that's where we're going. we've obviously now come out of Europe, and we're at this point. What do we do? Do we stick with Europe, or do we plough our own furrow? If we're going to plough our own furrow, we want a hand in the direction that we take. Well, I think it's up to the industry to provide DEFRA, who are ultimately the policymakers, on what would be best for the industry. Certainly, and if I take the siphon, if we want to put a device in that doesn't leak, put a siphon in. Not all manufacturers are going to be able to do that.
Yep.
And not all users want that. So, okay, where's the compromise? And I think that's what we're trying to work through at the moment with the meetings we're having with DEFRA, leaky loos, etc. How can we find some middle ground that keeps the industry still growing and enables the industry to move with that change? Certainly, Tom talked about the air gap and various issues we'd had with RAS there. You know, at one point they were talking about changing overnight. You can't change a business overnight. You know, you need a transitional period, and we're talking about millions of pounds worth of investments. So ultimately, we need 2 to 4 years probably to get ourselves in the right shape to be able to move forward in the direction that we agree.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of reasons why you'd need that transition time, aren't there? There's retooling at a very basic level, but also the way our sector works, there's various different steps in the supply chain, and each one of those steps is holding stock, so it's going to take a while to cleanse stock in the system.
One of the things the association wants to do is grow the industry. And if we're going to have quite a fundamental change, we can then look at where government support the change, but also incentivise people to make the change. So instead of your toilet that maybe wastes water or uses 9 litres, keeping it for another 5 years, you're incentivised, like what they did with boilers and that, to change it now and get the benefits sooner rather than later, which is going to be good for manufacturers.
Yeah, because with every change, as well as it being a challenge, there's unquestionably opportunities for manufacturers in those changes. And our job as an association is trying and maximise the opportunities and minimise the challenges.
Yeah, I suppose it's education for the general public. And they sort of ran those sort of communications of don't leave the tap running when you're brushing your teeth, things like that. And I think some people are aware of how to spot a leaky toilet. Most people probably don't even realise. And that's, you know, research suggests that over 4 million baths of drinking water every single day is lost through to leaking toilets. Now that's it's a huge amount of sort of water that they can't really afford to lose at the moment. That is simply going down the pan because people don't recognise that the toilet's literally down the pan. Yeah, some people just don't even notice that the toilet's leaking to start with, and then think, "Oh, I'll get that fixed." And a couple of days goes past, and then there's a bit more leaking. And you know, we were speaking to a couple of our ambassador plumbers, and they're saying that they go to the house to do a job, and then they say, "Oh, while you're here, could you have a look at the toilet? I think it's leaking." And they say, "Yeah, it's been leaking for weeks," and they just sort of got round to doing it. So. Does the BMA sort of get involved with trying to sort of looking at ways to educate the general public on how sort of policy changes can happen, how things that we need to be doing better?
Oh, we certainly try and educate the public. So a few years ago, we ran a campaign called Get Lavvy Savvy, which was about just the issue that you identified. But I think that there is really, really low levels of awareness about water scarcity in the UK. And that's no surprise. I mean, we're filming this
from the sky,
in April. I think it's rained pretty much constantly for 6 months, hasn't it? So, you know, it's no wonder that the public is, you know, unaware of the levels of water scarcity in certain parts of the country, and you know, to be fair, a little sceptical about some of the claims about how severe things are as well. So yeah, we've got a role to play in raising that awareness.
If you look at some of the standards though, pre-2001, ultimately you had a siphon in there. If the siphon diaphragm failed, your toilet wouldn't flush. You were forced to get it fixed.
Yeah.
If the inlet valve was leaking, which meant you had an overflow, generally you'd have a stream of water coming over a door or a window. You'd see it every day. Oh, I need to get it fixed. Now you don't have those mechanisms, and with the water going down the pan, in some cases it's not that visible. I know the BMA have worked with other people where you can buy a device that will show that. But then people say, well, I wonder what the cost of that water is. It's a few quid. How much is it going to cost to get a plumber out? And they they just leave it.
Yeah.
And we certainly were in one meeting where there was a member of a water authority said, I know I've got a problem, but it's just not worth the cost benefit to fix it, really.
I think he was actually a plumber, wasn't he?
Was he a plumber, was he?
He was a plumber that contracted for a water company. And he said, I just kind of did the weighing up exercise in my head and thought, I'm not going to bother today.
And we've got to change that attitude. Yeah.
I mean, I remember reading when the change happened in 2001, where the outlet valves were allowed in for the first time. I think the government were aware that there was a problem with them leaking, but they assumed that people would get them fixed within a period of time, which would cause minimal leaks. And the reality has been found that didn't happen. The reality was it leaked for quite a while afterwards. So I think that's sort of unintended consequences of a policy change, which the government haven't really fixed, in my opinion. It's been left for the manufacturers to try and come up with a solution. Companies like Thomas Dudley, because people like having buttons, let's face it, buttons are a lot nicer in a lot of areas. They're more aesthetically pleasing than a handle. And I think Thomas Dudley's coming up with ways to how do we fix it? How do we turn a siphon, which is a leak-free device, and activate it with a button. And I think it's coming up with some new innovative products that actually fit that. Their new quantum product is an amazing piece of technology that actually sort of fits that sort of every requirement you could possibly have. But from a manufacturers association, getting that message across that to the politicians that, again, don't do anything that's going to cause anything major problems. Think about what we're doing. It's probably a very tough task, I imagine.
Yeah, and just to kind of take it away from toilets for a second, we're facing the prospect of unintended consequences coming down the track in other areas of water efficiency policy. So, there is a very strong lobby to try and limit the flow rate on showers, for instance. Yeah. But we've seen some pretty compelling evidence coming out of third-party organisations like the University of Surrey, which suggests that actually, once you go below a certain level, it just extends people's time in the shower because they're trying to achieve a certain experience or sensation from the shower, which just results in a higher kind of total water use from that showering event. So, again, there could be unintended consequences if we say cap flow rates at 6 litres per minute. So we've got to think through policy in a bit more of a holistic way and really look at what we're trying to achieve as a sector, and we want to try and help the government to have that more rounded view. And because we're all committed to lowering water use.
Yeah. And it depends what you're using it for. I mean, I use a shower to get clean. So generally, I get up in the morning, I'm in there and I'm out within sort of 4 minutes. My partner, she's probably in there about 25 minutes. She's listening to some tunes or something in there, and she's treating us like a relaxation experience. It's very, very different. Yeah. You're not going to change those behaviours.
But if that shower's delivering a benefit, it might not be the benefit of getting clean, but a kind of well-being benefit. Yeah. That's not wasted water, is it?
No, definitely not.
And I think the more maybe people try and force change, or the more people tend to resist changes as it goes as well, which they have to be careful. There's a line I would have thought to walk down to make sure they get it right. And like I say, sometimes you stand in the shower, you can be in and out in a couple of minutes, as Jay said, 4 minutes in and out. But sometimes it's nice to stand in the shower, and especially, when it's the hot water hitting your head, it's nice to stand there for a few extra minutes. I always find, but
I'm really interested in this kind of behavioural human factor stuff and ergonomics. And one of the things I really like about the quantum product is that you've kind of taken human behaviour into account in the designing that product. And there are in the interests of being impartial, as a chief exec of the BMA, there's other kind of products coming to the fore across toilet flushing, across showering, which do take into account human behaviour and put it central to the product design. I think that's a huge step forward.
I think that's important. The whole industry moves, because if you've only got one player that moves, you're unlikely to get legislation to force that type of product to be used, because they're not likely to give it to a monopoly. So we do need the whole industry to move. But I was at another meeting where we were talking about water usage in toilets, and there was an argument, well, we just need to drive towards low water toilets. No, we need both. Because, yes, we can have a 4 litre toilet, but if it leaks, it still leaks the same as a 6 litre or a 9 litre. It still leaks.
And it'll still leak the same amount of water as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So we need to no leak and lower water.
Well, and even more fundamental question than that, why are we still flushing toilets with potable water. Surely grey water and dual piping in properties is going to help in this agenda.
But we're building a new factory or an add-on to our factory, and when you start looking, that technology is not readily available. And I've spoken to a couple of architects. We'd like to do this, and it's like, I haven't done that yet. I haven't done that. So I'm not sure it's out there or widely commercially available at the moment.
Yeah, because I think and people don't realise that when the rain hits your roof, especially if you're a company owner, you've got to pay to have that water taken away. So if you could come up with a better way of doing it, storing it in tanks, which you can then use to float, would save a lot of benefit for businesses and water usage as well. Because we've got to be thinking smarter. I think as companies, as industries, as governments, we've all got to be looking down the line 10, 20 years and thinking, okay, what's the best thing to do now? We've got to try and get it right this time. Because although they get a lot of things right, got a lot of things wrong, and sometimes short-term thinking can lead to sort of quick decisions that aren't necessarily the right decisions. So, I mean, as an association and manufacturers, innovation and water savings, I suppose, is that a key driver now for key messaging and from a manufacturer's point of view, new product development? Is that something that's really driving things?
There's a number of macro trends, I think, that a manufacturer sort of tries to keep its finger on the pulse with. And certainly water is going to become more and more scarce as a resource. If we look, we're definitely having a change in weather patterns. So we've either got too much water or too little. So how do we harvest that water is going to be a factor. And then the population of the whole world is growing and there's not more water. So we've got to use it more sparingly. So those are key considerations in our product roadmap for the future.
And kind of moving it beyond water as well. So there's some changes coming in regulation, particularly in the European Union, and I expect the UK to follow, around circularity of product and something called digital product passports, which will really follow a product through its whole life cycle. And that's going to drive a move towards repairability in the bathroom sector as it already exists in the appliances sector. Also, the circularity of materials, the ability to reuse materials and extend their life. So, these are all changes coming forward, which are inevitably will force innovation.
Yeah. I suppose looking at innovation, trends in bathrooms probably changed quite a lot over the years. I remember being, I'm from an age where sort of gaudy colours were once sort of all the trend, and ironically they've become sort of back into fashion again now. But I suppose you've probably seen quite a lot of changes from a bathroom manufacturers association of how they look. I mean, I remember my mum used to have a doll with a lacy doily dress on. They used to sit on top of the toilet roll in the bathroom. So, it's kind of little
They've
things.
They've not come back, have they? I
don't think so. I think my nan, I had one at some point, but I think it's those little chintzy things. I saw something on the news on the internet where sort of like the fluffy covers for the toilet seats. Someone had one that they were bringing back out. But I know, a terrible thought. But I suppose it's one of those things that as fashions come round. You sort of seeing that in how sort of. Maybe not necessarily from Thomas Dudley's point of view, but maybe from the ceramics point of view, where they are bringing back into sort of more sort of off-the-shelf colour schemes into bathrooms now.
Because you talked earlier about bathrooms being sexy. I mean, your bathroom was a very functional place. It was somewhere where you used, nobody else would use it. I think the world's moved on massively. I mean, people spent lots of money on the kitchen. That was their showpiece of their house. Well, the kitchen still is the showpiece, but now the bathroom is also, and definitely I know people, they're quite proud of their bathroom, and when they've had it refurbished, they want to show you, and it's like, look at my digital shower, look at my low water toilet, look at this, my bath, my jacuzzi bath, etc. They get very proud of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And, we do regular trend analysis particularly from the trade shows to see kind of what's going on from a kind of whole sector perspective. And I think colours were, in sanitary wear at least, that's actually perhaps a bit of a flash in the pan from the last couple of years, pardon the expression. But certainly more interesting things around furniture. So furniture has grown to be the second biggest product category within the bathroom, from a pretty much standing start when you think of the old three-piece suites. Yeah, that's a really interesting trend. But for me, the most exciting trend is around the ratios of bathrooms to bedrooms. So we've seen quite a bit of research around what's called a golden ratio in terms of your property value, where one bathroom to one bedroom is the golden ratio. You're going to achieve a kind of maximum return on your property if you make investment in that area. So that for me is perhaps not reached the middle market yet. It's very much a kind of high end market trend. But I think you're going to see that expand in the years to come. That's quite exciting for bathroom manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to somebody the other day, and there's a new programme that was on BBC iPlayer, and it was about Birmingham in the 70s, and one of the opening scenes is they're sitting in the outside toilet, and I'm like, did you have an outside toilet? No. And they lived in quite a lot. They lived in a 9-bedroom house, this person, and they had one toilet inside. Imagine that today. I mean, it'd just be chaos, wouldn't it?
Well, even really small new build homes, most have a master ensuite.
Yeah.
Just as standard. And
definitely, I've seen some 2 bedrooms that have got 2 ensuites. Yeah. They don't have a sort of a standard bathroom. They've just got 2 ensuites back to back.
So I suppose it's meeting demands from customers. I suppose people like their own space in those areas, and I suppose people still perceive maybe an ensuite as a luxury. So when they're looking to buy houses, it's like it's a luxury, but it's moving from being a luxury to a must-have. It's almost like a standard commonplace thing that they have now.
Yeah, if you look how we've progressed, though, we've become a lot more private, haven't we? I mean, when I went to school, you all had to shower the same in a big communal shower. The swimming baths, they were sort of large group changing areas. If you ask people to do that these days, they won't do that. Yeah. And certainly people just don't like sharing the bathroom. They like their own.
I wonder whether it's a bit of a pandemic hangover, actually, that, you know, we all kind of were forced to live for 24 hours a day in our homes, and pretty much the only place you could get any privacy and peace was your bathroom. And perhaps that's just that's continuing and part of everyday life now.
I suppose with COVID, when it hit, it changed a lot all at once. Did you see many sort of impacts on how the association was able to go about doing its business at that particular point?
Well, we were really fortunate in that we moved away from things like an office-based server about 3 months before the pandemic.
You timed it perfectly. It was like you had a vision. This was going to happen.
It was incredibly prescient. That was more by luck than judgment. But it did mean that we were able to kind of pick up our computers and work from day one. And a couple of members of staff went onto the furlough scheme, but the business continued and the association continued to provide advocacy for its members straight away. In fact, I think we came into our own a little bit in terms of the insight and the sense of community that we were able to generate within the sector. There are some things like the managing directors meeting, which happens on a quarterly basis, that we set up in the pandemic, that's continued. The credit circle has continued to this day, and I think it spurred us into providing a bit more value for members.
Yeah, and I think the fact that a number of the habits that were forced on us because of COVID, we've maintained. And as Tom mentioned, the MDs meeting, trying to get the MDs from the main players within the industry to all to come together for a meeting in one place. It's probably not the best use of your time, because some of us are going to have to drive 3 hours there and 3 hours back, whereas now we do it all online, and it works really well, and the level of participation is far greater, and attendance.
I suppose the pandemic forced that kind of change through, whereas we probably would have gone along kicking and screaming to that particular changes, and it's like going almost cashless almost. Before COVID, I couldn't see anyone ever giving up cash. Now, I never carry cash around with me anymore, and that's a surprise to me, because I was one of the people that thought, no, never going to give up cash now. Someone ever asks me for it, I haven't got any money. I forget what it looks like now. But I suppose it has positives and negatives, I suppose, of the impact. Did you find that politicians sort of were, during the time of COVID and just after, were they trying to be more helpful in terms of how they approached organisations like yourselves?
Certainly the engagement is... for a time, it got a bit easier, actually, because just as we switched to online meetings, so did they. So there was the ability to get kind of more of those one-to-one meetings with politicians and civil servants. I think as things have kind of unwound and that the world's opened up and they're now back to the kind of regular meeting schedule, that it's presented a few more challenges actually to trade associations in getting that engagement. But we persist.
Cool. I mean, how many members has the BMA got now?
We're up to about 60 full members, which are manufacturers, plus there's 25 or so affiliates who are organisations that support manufacturers in various different ways.
Can I say, because I saw you guys at the installer show, when you had George Clark. The nice seats on his stand, which I thought was very good, and he got a very big crowd. Everyone likes George Clark. Do you find that engaging with plumbers events like the installer is important as well?
Installer shows become a really important part of our calendar, and we did some research a few years ago around the purchasing cycle and what goes on in consumers' minds when they're going through that purchasing cycle. And right out in front came the influence of the installer. Yeah. So they are a absolutely critical stakeholder for all bathroom manufacturers and for us as an association, reaching them with key messages. And installer shows the place to be if you want to engage with those people. Yeah. So it's become really important, and it's quite good fun as well.
It was a fun event last time.
Yeah. I think Tom and the team deserve a lot of credit for that, because it was the first time really we'd done an event on that scale, and to be in the centre of the exhibition and the voice of that industry, it just all seemed to sort of come together and work really well. And Tom did quite well as a host as well, asking the questions. But no, I thought it was, it really lifted the BMA and made some people who, think of it as, they are the industry leader. Yeah, they're bringing us all together.
It was a bit like a town square, really, for manufacturers, wasn't it? It was the place to come together and have the kind of cross-industry discussions as you were having the kind of one-to-one discussions with installers on
your own stands. If you looked at what previously we had, it was like a small booth or something with a little stand-up desk, and that was it. You know, you could probably get about 3 people on there. It wasn't a social hub at all. Yeah.
It definitely looked busy all the time, every time I walked past. Yeah. Which is really good. I suppose, influencing the installers, I suppose, is very important. I remember when I had my bathroom done a couple of years ago, I took on whatever the plumber told me, really. He said, well, yes, you do this, yes, you do that, or we can fit that in. We can do. I'm like,
it was all Dudley, wasn't it?
100% Dudley products inside the system itself. But it was,
you got a Resan toilet.
I don't think my floor in my bathroom would take the weight of a Resan toilet, I don't think. But so I took on board what he said, in terms of what it was a very clever idea, because I got a very small bathroom, but he recommended a bath that was very thin on the edges, so they actually got more into we could hold more water in the same space, so it felt like it was a bigger bath, whereas if I'd gone one that had the wider sides, then I would have got a lot less in. And being a bit tall, it benefited me no end. So I was quite impressed with the advice that the installer gave me, but I wouldn't have thought of that because I didn't know that existed. The same, and this is my embarrassment now, before I came to work at Thomas Dudley, I didn't know the difference between a button and a handle and a flush handle. I had no idea what that meant. For anyone who doesn't know, which was me, a button, it'll have a valve, it'll have a handle, it'll have a siphon. That's as far as my technical knowledge goes.
Did you choose your bathroom, or did your wife?
I think I chose a couple of elements, that's a bit more to do with the tiling than anything else. See, you put the money aside for this, I was keeping it for a motorbike until I decided that I needed a bathroom instead. So
that's really reassuring, actually, that your experience of the installer helping with the design was such a positive one. Yeah. The research we've got is that where design has been left to an installer, the levels of dissatisfaction among consumers at the end of the project is so much higher. So that's one of the reasons this year's installer show, we're going to run a couple of sessions aimed at installers on how you can achieve better design outcomes for your customers.
So I think some of the trust in it.
Some of the research we've done, though, there are a group of plumbers that take it to the next level. That it isn't just about plumbing your bathroom, it's about giving you the best, and they've got a wealth of knowledge that you could probably go and get if you wanted to spend every Saturday afternoon traipsing around bathroom showrooms. But I guess you don't really want to do that, do you?
No. I'm good time for that. It was even down to where do you want the button? explaining where do you want to put the button to flush the toilet, where do you want it, and he was my link to the world at that point, because he sorted the tiler out, he recommended where we could get the floor, how we were going to do that, and your recommendation on tap. So it was, without the installer, I would have struggled to have done that. So yeah, anything that I think the BMA does with installers, I think should be a really benefit to everybody. So, I mean, Jason, just a quick question for yourself, as well as sort of being El Presidente of the BMA. Obviously, you're the MD of Thomas Dudley, which has a conglomerate of different businesses that go attached with it. That's got to be quite a challenge.
Well, I think first of all, I've sort of grown up in that, knowing that, so it's no different to me. A lot of good practices can be carried across all the different kinds of businesses. It's certainly a challenge to try and get all the businesses performing really well at the same time. Yeah. Generally, it's one's up and one's down, and three are okay. But I think strategically that's the right thing to do, because what we have done across the group, we've de-risked our business, and even in some turbulent times, we still generally do okay.
Because Thomas Dudley owns a couple of foundries as well, which probably it shouldn't surprise people, because that's how Thomas Dudley started, but probably would surprise people that Thomas Dudley still operates a couple of foundries, which I think is probably a rarity nowadays in the UK. So that's got to be exciting, challenging, difficult, sort of rewarding all at once by running a foundry, I would imagine.
It's a roller coaster running a foundry. I think one year you have a good year, and then the next year you have a terrible year. We started with a foundry in 1920, so that's really in our blood, and I can't ever see that changing. The foundry industry has reduced massively, but with lots of changes around the world, I think now the foundry base in the UK, generally most foundries can be quite prosperous. There's a place for them. We've got a very full order book. And we're winning more and more business as time goes on. I think the difficulty comes with a foundry is finding the technical skills. We're going further and further afield to recruit those skills. We've also invested in a foundry training college with Wolverhampton University and the local LEP. And we're just hoping more and more people want to come and work in the foundry, but it's probably not the most pleasant of working environments.
No. And I suppose it's like almost like a calling. In fact, a lot of people will be family related. Their dads did it, they've worked through. But I imagine foundry's hard work, but still rewarding in what it does.
Yeah, I mean, we take regular surveys from our people, and they generally enjoy working in a foundry. I think once they've started working in a foundry, and they tend to have a sense of belonging, and they just stay within the foundry. We've got one family where father, mother, and son had done over 100 years between them. But yeah, the foundries moved on a lot from when I sort of started in the industry. And if I think at one point we had 7 plants, and there was about 40 people running those plants, and now we've got 3 plants, and there's probably about 12 people running them, and they're more productive than those 7 plants. That hasn't meant that we've lost those people. We've just put them into other areas within the business.
I suppose with what's going on in the world at the moment with Ukraine and the Middle East and the Horn of Africa problems and the sort of getting supply in, I suppose it focuses the mind on, and we had a conversation with the Made in Britain team about looking for companies that manufacture here as well, because that's be a benefit in terms not only for the environment because of reduced carbon footprints, but also for improvement of supply chain.
Yeah, and I think COVID and what's happening in the Red Sea at the moment is really good for UK manufacturing. I'm not sure where it's all going to pan out. It was interesting at COVID, there was certainly a real focus and passion quickly to buy from the UK. And we spent quite a bit of time with a number of quite high-profile customers who, we're going to source locally, we're not going to buy from abroad. I think 50% of them probably went back to China when that became viable again and the routes opened. The other 50%, probably half, stayed buying in the UK, and the other half of dual source, which I think is probably the best solution for everybody, really. I think the Red Sea is creating some issues now. who knows where that's going to end, but certainly for some of the components that we buy, you're talking 18 weeks now to get those. So it's, from a business point of view, it's going to mean there's a lot of cash and a lot of space tied up in stock. And I'm not sure all businesses can cope with that.
Yeah.
I think we've got quite an interesting position in the BMA because we've got the full range of different value chains within membership, from kind of UK manufacturers like Thomas Dudley through to European, Far Eastern and rest of the world manufacturers as well. So we kind of see things from all angles. And I think something which is obvious, and I gave a presentation recently to the BMF on this, is that we're going through a period after kind of 20, 30 years of globalisation, harmonisation of regulations and so on. We're going through a period now where there is quite a lot of turmoil and geopolitical risk, not just in the Horn of Africa or the South China Sea. All over the world, there's kind of different elements of political risk and a tendency to move away from globalisation towards more protectionist policies, and we've seen this with Trump and Biden's policies in the States, and the Inflation Reduction Act and so on. So it's not kind of isolated to one area of the world. I think that what that's leading to is manufacturers of all stripes looking to spread their risk a little bit, and that doesn't mean onshoring back to the UK or even nearshoring, but about kind of diversification of your supply chain and looking at different markets and just spreading your risk, really. But yeah, I think we're certainly living through a period of change.
Yeah, and as a manufacturer, I mean, we've always had the desire to become self-sufficient. If we look, we buy very, very few items in. We like to try and make everything. And I think that will only grow in time because our passion really is about manufacturing.
Yeah.
Do you find your workforce have a particular pride because they are producing something which is tangible and that goes out the door and it's got the kind of Thomas Dudley stamp on it?
Yeah, and I mean, it's only a small thing, but when we, at Christmas time, we have Santa's Grotto and we invite all our employees with their kids and Santa's there. But
Jason dresses up as an elf.
I dress up as an elf. Thanks for that, Mark. But we make some cast iron keys in the foundry and they become like a collectible item.
They
And,
do.
people have... We powder coat them in a different colour every year, and it's like I've got every single year, and they are literally collecting those items.
I've got one from the year that I've been there. I've been Thompson 4 years, and I've got one for each of the years I was there, which we put down every year. Bring home. Oh, it's the key to Santa's Grotto,
and it's bizarre. It's the simplest little things. I mean, Cronex, one of our export companies, they do a pen sort of holder, really. It's a pen pot, and it's got a calendar on and everything. And when I went to the Caribbean to visit some customers, literally every single year they're on the bookshelf like a trophy, just all sat there. You think, right, that's a bit bizarre, isn't it? But really valued. And if they're missing one, that was normally the first question. If anything I can help you with, can you get me one of the 2016 one of those, please?
Fill the gap.
Yeah, fill the gap. Yeah. So Jason, I understand that you're going to be doing a 100-mile cycle ride for charity. That's 100 miles in a day, by the way. Again, which is about 70 miles more than I've managed. So, how did that come about? How did you get involved with that?
As a company, we try to do lots of events for various charities, and we try to pick charities that are local to us. We definitely have a theme at Christmas where all the directors are presented with a cheque and they nominate a local charity and hand that out. This one is a charity in Wolverhampton. It goes from Wolverhampton to Abu Dhabi. If anyone's been to Abu Dhabi, you find most of the businessmen from Wolverhampton there on a weekend. Wolverhampton on Sea, they call it. And we did it about 3 years. I think we did it 3 or 4 years ago as a company, but there was only really a couple of us who did it that time. We've got a greater team doing it this time, and it's a bit of fun. But it is an endurance event. So, yes, you do need to do training. I've tried to coax some people into do it, and they've said not a chance. I definitely am in training, but I like doing triathlons, so generally I do training for that. So 100 miles shouldn't be too bad in a day.
Well, so rather than me, I mean, I like cycling. I do a lot of mountain biking off road and through the mud and stuff, which I quite really enjoy. But I don't know if I could do 100 miles all in one go. I don't think I could manage that. But so, what's the charity you do it for? Is it
It's the Wolverhampton Police. We do it for. They're the people who run it. Yeah.
Cool, excellent. Tom, just a couple of final questions for yourself, being a bit more light-hearted, really, outside of, we talk about the Mediterranean, the Middle Eastern problems there. So just a quick light-hearted one. You can both answer this question, actually, from representatives of the Bathroom Manufacturers Association. So if bathrooms could talk, what do you think they'd say about their human occupants?
That's a crazy question, isn't it? Well, bathrooms can talk.
Oh, go on.
So you get smart mirrors now that tell you what age you look, toilets that tell you what you've been eating, things like that, and how to improve your diet. So there's some pretty crazy products out there that do talk to you already. I mean,
I suppose Japan has a lot of those kind of products that are quite far advanced in terms of toilets. Do you ever see any of that really coming over here or not?
You see it at the trade shows. I'm not sure how popular they are actually in the marketplace, but the products are there.
Yeah, I mean, some high-end hotels only have those type of toilets, which always creates some confusion when you want to go and use them. What would they say?
Yeah, get out probably.
Yeah. Clean me.
Yeah. I suppose
get out the shower and save some water.
Yeah. Stop flushing me. Just a final one. So, as an association, again for both of you, if you had to choose a product to be the association's mascot, what would you choose? To me, it'd have to be a Thomas Dudley siphon, but that's just me being biased.
I think it's like choosing between my children. There are different product categories in BMA's membership. I suppose we spend up most of our time, or the largest amount of our time, on toilets.
So
at the moment, obviously that might change with changing policy priorities, but. Yeah. No, that's a hard question. I can't answer it.
Oh, we should put him on the spot and make him choose.
Obviously, my bias would to be towards a Dudley siphon, but I think a Thomas Crapper toilet.
Okay,
that's where it all started.
That's fair enough.
Thomas Crapper, our newest members as well.
There you go. Full circle. So I think we're just about out of time, actually, gents. So I'd just like to thank our guests, Tom Reynolds from the BMA and Jason Parker, also from the BMA, but also from Thomas Dudley as well. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to hit the like and subscribe buttons wherever they are on your screen, whatever device you're using. And you can follow Thomas Dudley on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn and X. And just final one, you got a website for the BMA?
Yeah, bathroom-association.org.uk.
There you go. So please visit them. And if you're not a member, please join. So until the next episode of Dudley Unplugged, this is Mark Morris signing off.